what's up, everyone? It's Sam Shaw here from Wall Street Mastermind. I'm back here today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I have Jerry on with me, and I'm very excited to have him on just because Jerry just finished going through the summer 2021 recruiting process as an international student. And I know that in this day and age, it's extremely difficult to recruit as an international student. And so I wanted to get him on here and just kind of share his experience with you guys, talk to you about how he was able to navigate through that entire process, and just hopefully give you guys some insight into how you could potentially go through this process on your own as well. And so, Jerry, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, and it's good to have you on.
Yeah, of course, no worries.
To start, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, just to give our listeners a bit of a idea of kind of what kind of candidate you were coming in.
Yeah, sure. So for some context, as you mentioned, I'm an international student and then studying at a target on the West Coast, target school on the West Coast, studying economics. And in terms of, my stats for coming into IB recruiting, my GPA at the time was pretty average, around 3.3. And then in terms of experiences that I had, I was part of a consulting club on campus, and I also had a couple previous internships, just one at a regional investment bank in my home country, and then also an equity research internship as well before that in my home country as well.
Okay, got it. So you're an international student and you had done some relevant internships, it sounds like, but not in the States, but back in your home country, which I guess sometimes, I don't know, depending on, sometimes gets discounted a little bit, but
yeah.
And then your GPA was on the low side, but you did go to target school, essentially. Okay, got it. And so take us back to the beginning, man. Like, when you first started recruiting or deciding that you want to recruit for investment banking, and before you actually, even found Wall Street Mastermind, like, what was that process like for you? Like, how are you going about it, and just how are things going for you in general?
Yeah, so thinking back to when I decided that I wanted to recruit for investment banking, it was actually just after my sophomore summer internship. So I had just completed a summer in investment banking, and only then did I realize, investment banking is a career that I wanted to pursue post-graduation. So after the sophomore summer, as you know, it's actually in the later half of the recruitment process, especially with a lot of processes kicking off in the first half of the year during the spring semester. Mm-hmm. So by the time I had decided that I wanted to pursue investment banking, a lot of processes were already done, or a lot of banks were in the middle of their processes. So I guess I was caught off guard, and I wasn't really prepared for that recruiting cycle. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you did the sophomore internship at the boutique investment bank back in your home country. And then that's when you realize, oh, wow, I really enjoy this and I want to do this for full time. Let me look into recruiting for this for full time, and then, or for my junior summer internship. And then that's the first time you realized that you were actually super behind already.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay. So coming back into your junior year then, like basically right when fall semester started. So was that pretty much when you found this then? Because I think got it. Because I think you joined around like August or something, right?
September-ish, yeah.
September-ish, okay. Got it.
Just when fall semester was starting, yeah.
Yeah, got it. How did you find out about us, by the way?
Let me think back. I think it was just browsing the internet, I believe. Yeah.
Got it. You probably saw one of our ads or something.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
So then you found us, you hopped on a call, probably with me directly, if I remember correctly. And then like, what made you ultimately decide to join something like Wall Street Mastermind? Because, I mean, even now, I would say, look, we're becoming a bit more well-known and more people are starting to hear about us. Back when you joined, I think we were still maybe relatively newer, right? And so
hmm
I don't know if you personally knew anyone that had used that program, probably not. Like,
mm
what gave you the confidence to want to come to the program and do something like this that's kind of different from what everyone else is doing?
Right. Yeah. Um, so I had one friend that was already part of the program with you. So um, I didn't get the chance to speak to him about it actually, but that kind of also, gave me some reassurance that okay, he was able to achieve some pretty good results through Wall Street Mastermind, and I felt like um, it was in line with what I was looking for. I think the main thing though was just that, especially considering I was so late to the investment banking recruiting process, and I was so behind everyone else. I was, my starting line was a lot further back compared to a lot of people. I
Mm.
felt like um, I needed a go-to resource that could provide, all the knowledge and resources I need so that I could catch up to speed. I felt that, honestly, at that time, it was getting quite urgent because it was very late in the recruiting process.
Yeah,
And if I had to spend that time myself, going through all the material that I needed to be ready for the recruitment processes, also, learning all the technicals myself, I thought that it would take too long, and it probably wouldn't have worked out very well.
got it, got it. Okay. I didn't realize that you had a friend in the program already. What's the, let's not give away the full name, but what's the first name of your friend? I'm curious who it is actually.
David?
Ah, okay. David from Berkeley?
Yeah,
Got it, got it. Okay. Okay, I know who you're talking about.
yeah.
That's cool. And so okay, so then you hopped on the call, you decided you want our help catching up with the recruiting process because obviously you were so behind already. And as an international student, obviously you have even fewer opportunities than just like a typical candidate because not all firms actually even sponsor, right?
Right, yeah.
And then a lot of the bigger firms that do sponsor, they were already kind of wrapping up their processes, and so you
hmm
kind of didn't have too many options left in terms of firms you could actually be eligible for. So you hopped in
Yeah.
the program. Um, I think this was so long ago. This was over a year ago, but I think if I remember correctly, I also had to speak to your mom beforehand, right?
Yeah, correct.
Oh,
Yeah. Because after I spoke to you, I obviously had to speak to my mom about it, um, and then I believe you two spoke on the phone as well. Yeah.
yeah, got it. Okay, so then spoke to your mom. She was like supportive of you coming into the program, I guess. And then so we started catching up for summer
hmm
2020 recruiting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Even though it was kind of late for that. And then so what were some of the things that we did in the program once you came in? Like what did you find to be most helpful, I guess?
I think for me, what definitely helped a lot was the technical knowledge modules. I was able to quickly go through those, and that really made sure that I had all the technical questions set, um, because I didn't have to spend time, going through theory and uh, trying to figure out, what exactly do I need to know, what do I not need to know. So those technical modules definitely helped a lot because I was confident, I could go through these modules in the order that you laid them out,
Yeah.
and it was exactly what I needed to do well in the interviews, and
Mm,
it also simplified a lot of complex concepts that I don't learn as an economics major.
mm.
So I think the technical modules definitely helped a lot, especially that late in the recruitment process.
Got it. So basically, having everything in one place, not having to guess or try to figure out what you need to do and what you don't need to do, and then just going through everything in the order that it's laid out, and it's
Yeah,
basically simplifies the entire process, which allows you to speed things up and kind of catch up in the shortest amount of time possible.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So then you learn all the technicals as quickly as you could. Was there anything else that you felt like was helpful to you in addition to the technicals?
Yeah, I think especially during that time, uh, just being able to reach out to you at any time, to ask, just random off the cuff questions regarding like any situation that I was in the midst of the recruiting season. I think that was really helpful and also reassuring. There were a lot of times where you get an email or you might have a conversation, you're not exactly sure how to approach it or not sure how to follow up with certain conversations that you have, but I can just quickly shoot you a message and ask you, how should I word this? How should I approach this? What should I do about the situation? And then that, I think that kind of 24/7 advice really helps. Yeah.
Got it. So like when you say, just so, because people who are in the program, they probably don't have an idea what you're talking about. Like when you say like, can just shoot us a message, like what does that mean? Like
just like so we use Slack, right? So I can just go on the Slack channel. It's the communication app that we use, and then I just send you a message and I know you're going to reply pretty soon, and then you're going to give me, tell me exactly what I need to do to approach whatever situation I'm in.
Got it. Okay, so having us basically available 24/7, where anytime you have a question about any little thing, any little random thing where you might not be able to go find the answer online somewhere, you just, instead of doing that, you can just come over to Slack, shoot us a quick instant message, and then wait for us to respond, typically within like a couple hours, or if not sooner, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I could see how, having something like that, it's almost like you never have to worry about not knowing what to do for any given situation, right? Because you never know what situation is going to come up, or what a certain banker is going to say to you, or what question they ask you, or whatever. And then, or even sometimes if you had a networking conversation, or maybe you go through an interview and then you feel like, oh, there was this question that I got that I could have done better on, and I'm not really sure. I know I messed it up, but I'm not really sure what I should have done differently. And then you can basically come back and discuss that with us and figure out like, okay, next time if this comes up again, what is the best way for me to handle this?
Exactly, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Understood. So then we go through this process for summer 2020. You were already starting late. So obviously, like at that point, since it was already junior year, most of the bulge bracket and elite boutique banks were done already, right? So
correct, yeah.
What was that process for you like? Like, were you able to get interviews still? And like, if so, like, what type of firms are you getting interviews with? And like, how many interviews were you able to get? Can you give people kind of a sense of how hard it was?
Yeah, so it definitely was quite hard, especially being an international student and with a lot of the banks already being done. But I was able to land an interview with an elite boutique, a couple middle market banks, and then a handful of regional, like pretty good regional banks on the West Coast. And yeah, I think that definitely surprised me, because I honestly didn't expect to land interviews with any elite boutiques or middle market banks at that time, considering how late in the process was. But yeah, I was able to land quite a number of interviews during that process, summer 2020 process.
Got it. Like, do you remember roughly how many interviews in total? It sounds like it's maybe like at least a handful.
Yeah, like probably with at least like 6 shops.
Okay, got it. And how did you, the one question that I always get from international students is like, how do I know who's sponsoring? Like, how do I know, like at that point in the process, how did you know which firms you should go after, or like who you should be reaching out to? And should I even waste my time with this firm? Like, how did you go about sorting that out?
Yeah, I think honestly at first, a lot of time was just shooting for basically all the firms and then figuring out the sponsorship part later, because every bank is, I think right now especially, banks are very nuanced with how they treat international students, right? So there's some banks that don't sponsor and don't hire some interns, and then there's banks that definitely do, and then there's also banks that may sponsor you but only if you're a standout candidate. So I think all the banks are very nuanced, and not only that, but it changes every year. So I agree that it's not exactly perfect information. So at first I think I definitely just applied everywhere and then figured out the international student part later on in the process when it came to that. It was a bridge that, you know, you cross later when you get there. But I remember, I think what helped a lot in terms of getting a better understanding of how each bank treats international students was in the Slack channel. When you created the international students channel within Slack. And then I remember there was a lot of discussion with other students about, you know, which banks did they see sponsoring, which banks did they find out were not sponsoring, and then that was really helpful information. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So basically, being a part of the Wall Street Mastermind community and having access to the community through the Slack channel where people are always helping each other out and being super collaborative about it, you can essentially crowdsource it a little bit of like, not just you trying to figure out which bank sponsored on your own, but also talking to other people, to other international students to figure out what they've been hearing. And then that helps you become a little bit more targeted with what firms you go after.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, look, the toughest part, like you said, I think, is that there is no set list, right? Because every bank, even banks that sponsor, like some years they do and some years they don't. Like I remember last year for summer 2021, I had clients get sponsored for places like JP Morgan. And then for summer 2021, this year around, I think JP Morgan stopped sponsoring, right? And then it was like a lot of international students were super disappointed because they were counting on a firm like JP Morgan to continue to sponsor, and they stopped doing it. And so it's like
exactly.
every time an international student asks me like which bank's going to sponsor, I always tell them I don't know. Like, but what I do know is you're going to have to cast a much wider net, and also you're going to have to know how to network with the people at the firm, because that's really the best way to find out that kind of information, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of crossing the bridge once you get there, so okay, I understand that was your approach, and so you went through these interview processes, and then you even ended up getting some offers, right, for summer 2020.
Yeah.
How many offers did you end up getting, by the way, for 2020?
I ended up getting two. So one at a middle market bank, and then one at a regional boutique.
Okay, got it. And something pretty crappy happened, right, with the offer because because of what you said about crossing that bridge when you get there. Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it was one of the last processes that I was part of, and then so I went through the process, and then did really well, had the super day, and then the day after the super day, I remember they called back, and then I got an offer, so I was really stoked. So the middle market bank gave me the offer, but then immediately, like maybe an hour after I received the offer, they called me again, and they said, you know, hey, we just realized that you're an international student, and unfortunately, you know, we're gonna have to rescind your offer. We can't extend you an offer for the summer. So yeah, that definitely sucked. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have felt like for you. Just such a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster, right? Of going through this long grind, and then finally feeling, for that hour at least, feeling like everything worked out and you got the outcome you wanted, and then to have that taken away from you an hour later, like, oh, just kidding, you're an international student. It's just like, must have felt super unfair too. It's like you almost wish they just didn't give you the offer in the first place, and you probably would have felt better.
Pretty much.
Because it's like, okay, so you're saying I was good enough to get the offer and you liked me, but you literally are just not going to give me a job because you won't sponsor my visa.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember us talking about that and having a conversation about that. That was definitely a gut punch. And so, but you picked yourself up and you kept recruiting, and then basically you ended up with that second offer that you mentioned. And is that kind of what you ended up doing then for your sophomore, or not your sophomore, for your summer 2020 internship then?
Correct. Yeah. So I ended up interning at a regional boutique for my summer 2020. Yeah.
Got it. And not a lot of regional boutiques actually sponsor visas, right? So like,
correct.
How did you actually even figure out that this firm was sponsored?
So when I reached out, and networked with an associate at the bank. We developed pretty good rapport, and then he, he was happy to put me through the process. And he also mentioned that there was actually a couple of international people within the bank, because the bank's actually actually an international bank. So it's headquarters. It's a European bank, so it's headquarters in Europe, and then they're kind of just starting to expand in the US. So they actually had a number of international people within their office. So yeah, it was through networking and my conversations with an associate in the bank that he told me that they're happy to take on an international.
Got it. Okay, so it's not really your regional boutique bank like what you typically think. Like I think they're actually a pretty sizable bank with like an international presence and
all
over the globe, right? Got it.
Yeah.
But they're more well known in Europe than they are
than in the US. Yeah.
So that's actually a good tip, right? Which is, hey, there are a lot of these firms that are maybe stronger in Europe, but they're trying to expand to the US, and maybe they're not as well known here in the US yet, but because they're from Europe in the first place, they might be more open and willing to sponsor international students. And so it's like, you might want to check those out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So you did that for summer 2020, but obviously you could have stopped there, right? Because that would, you could have stopped there, you could have gone and worked there and then just, taken a return offer from there. But I guess you weren't completely satisfied with the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And so what you decided to do from there?
So I remember we kind of talked about my options, because, I felt that for summer 2020, my offer didn't really reflect. I felt like it didn't reflect my potential or what I could have achieved, especially because I was just so late to the process. And I felt that, if I really had a proper shot at the recruiting process, that I could land a much better offer. So I remember we talked about, either I could recruit again full-time during a full-time recruiting cycle, or alternatively, I could recruit again for summer 2021. And then ultimately, I felt like recruiting for summer 2021 would be better. I think it gave me a lot more options, and it was a bit more structured. And I think that was a big part of my decision. And I mean, I think honestly, it turned out really well, especially considering coronavirus. I know, with COVID-19, the full-time recruiting process this year was quite disrupted, I guess.
Yeah.
So looking back on that, it was a good decision to choose to do summer instead of full-time recruiting this year.
Right. Yeah, and back then we didn't know that coronavirus was going to happen.
Yeah, and we didn't know coronavirus was going to happen back then. Yeah.
Right. So to recruit again, just so people are clear on what we're saying though, to recruit again for summer 2021, you effectively had to delay your graduation a little bit so that you could be eligible for recruiting for the following summer, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So that's one thing for a lot of you that are listening out there too, is like sometimes we talk to students, maybe you're really late in the process, especially if you're an international student. If you're late to the process, like, at least Jerry he was late to the process, but he wasn't so late that he couldn't get an offer at all. But let's say if you're even later in the process, like if Jerry had come to us instead of in August or September, if he had come to us in November or December, where even the last few opportunities for international students have filled up and you just missed the boat completely, one option you might consider, if you're really dead set on going to investment banking, is you could just delay graduation by a semester. You take, instead of graduating in 4 years, maybe you graduate in 4.5 years. Maybe you spread out your classes a bit more. Maybe you pick up a double major, whatever it may be. But then that makes you eligible to recruit for the following summer. And then that gives you basically a new runway, so to speak, to kind of like basically dive into recruiting all over again and start from the beginning, right? Like while all the both back end and elite boutique banks are still recruiting, right? And so then you have more opportunities. So I agree. I mean, I think that, and look, like recruiting for a summer internship is always going to be easier than recruiting for full-time, right? Just because full-time, regardless of coronavirus or not, like with full-time, there's very, very, very few opportunities typically, because 80 to 90% of the full-time offers, even in a normal year, probably going to the summer intern class that, like the summer interns that perform well, they get a return offer, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of groups, they won't even hire for full-time. And even the groups that do hire for full-time, it's typically just one or two openings here and there. And you also may or may not even hear about the opening. Depends on if you have networked with people in the right groups. And like you said, it's a less structured process where it's very hit or miss, right? And then
Yeah.
even if you hear about the process, you're going to be competing against a lot of other students that did do a summer internship, maybe at another pretty good bank. And so it's just a more competitive pool in general, right? So we always tell people look, getting a summer internship itself is very, very hard. Getting a full-time offer is just that much harder, right? Which is just so if you're purely saying from a probability standpoint, strategically going for a summer internship is always going to be the better bet, right?
Yeah.
And so we do recommend, and you're not our only client that's done it. We have other clients that have done similar things before too, whether they're international or not. So got it. So then you recruit. So you started over. So obviously you did your internship, but then you started over. And actually probably even before you start your internship, you had to start over and immediately start thinking about 2021. As soon as 2020 ended, there's probably a very small gap. And then summer 2021 recruiting kicked off for some of the bigger banks, right? And so you went through that process all over again. Was there any difference the second time around? Now that you had gone through the process one time, and obviously you're probably more prepared and you're more familiar with what to expect. Did you see a significant difference in terms of your performance the second time around versus the first time?
Yeah, definitely. I think there were a couple of things, going through the process once, half the process once, I was quickly able to, learn from my mistakes, obviously, whether that was with how I was landing interviews or, once I got the interview, how I was executing in the interviews. So I think a couple of the main differences the second time around was that, firstly, because I had more time and I realized how important developing a strong network was. I was able to spend more time networking, and that definitely made a bigger difference in, the interviews that I was getting and how many interviews I was able to land. And then I would say another thing that I really worked on the second time around was behaviorals. So the behavioral aspect of my interviews, I think I was able to spend a lot more time on that and then really polish them the second time around. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I noticed the first time around you said the most helpful thing for you was technicals, and obviously you were just trying to get up to speed on learning all technicals in such a short amount of time and not messing that up. But that probably didn't leave you a lot of time to brush up on your behaviorals, which, believe it or not, and most people don't realize this, is that the behavioral questions are actually arguably even more important than the technicals, right? Meaning, I don't know what your experience was, but a lot of our clients tell us sometimes I mess up on a couple of technicals in interviews and then I still advance to the next round. And that's because if your behaviorals are strong enough and they like you enough, they're willing to let certain things slip, right? And then the opposite is also true, where if they don't like you as a person, doesn't matter how good your technicals are, they're probably not going to let you through to the next round, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think how I kind of came to see behaviorals versus technicals after this last recruiting season is that, technicals is more, you just get them right. Everyone's going to get them right. There's going to be a lot of smart finance kids that are going to get technical questions right. So it's on you to make sure you don't make any mistakes. And the right answer is the right answer, right? There's not going to be that much variation in how you answer technical questions compared to others. But behavioral questions, everyone's going to answer them differently. And that's the only part where you can really separate yourself from other candidates. And that's where you can really earn an offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said any better. That's pretty much exactly what I tell people is table stakes is the technicals. All the qualified candidates are going to be about the same. You're never going to be just so much better than everyone else in technicals. You just need to get to that level. And then on the behaviorals, though, that's where you can really blow other people out of the water if you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
How exactly did you get better at your behaviorals though? Because like a lot of times people think about like, okay, I need to get better at my behaviorals, and then what they're doing is probably like looking up a list of questions that I might get asked, and then I'm gonna go write out my answers, and I'm just gonna, practice it over and over and over again and memorize my answers. Right? And I hope,
Hmm.
and then like just through more practice and spending more time on it, my answer is gonna magically become significantly better. Like, is that
Hmm.
is that how it works, or is that how it worked for you, or what do you feel like made the biggest difference for your behavioral answers?
I would say, so, when I watched the behavioral interview module, that really guided how I did my first, I guess, draft of my behavioral answers, and how I thought about structuring my answers to behavioral questions. And then after that, I did that, what was really helpful was obviously having you go through every single answer that I had drafted, and you were really in every sentence, looking at every word and making the edits and comments that I needed to make them perfect. And I think also helped is that your behavioral answers, they update. There's new behavioral questions that I come across during the first recruiting cycle that I realized I need to be prepared for, and then being able to send you my answers I have at any time, and you being able to go over them, that definitely helped a lot. And that's the content side, and then the other side is delivery, right? How you deliver your behavioral answers. So doing those couple of mock interviews with you,
Mm.
you gave really good direct and precise advice, and feedback in terms of how I was delivering my behavioral answers, and you caught a lot of things that I had never even thought about. For example, how I started off my answers, or even subtle things like my body language. Um, yeah, that really direct and precise feedback that definitely improved my behavioral answers a lot as well.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like if I were to sum it up in one word, the biggest thing when it came to improving your behavior answers was feedback, both
Yeah.
on the content side of what you're saying in your answers and how you're structuring your answers, and down to like the specific sentences and words that you were using to tell your
Hmm.
stories, as well as on the delivery side. Because what most people don't realize is interview performance, how good it is less about what you say, but more about how you say it, right? Like, of course, what you
Correct.
say is important too, but I would say more than 50% of it is how you say it. As in, like, two different people with the exact same answers, if they deliver it differently, one person's going to sound a lot better than the other, right?
Yeah.
And so you're saying getting feedback on both of those things, not just through written feedback, but also through multiple mock interviews, and not just any mock interview, because people always talk about like doing mock interviews, but it's like you can do a mock interview and barely get any feedback, in which case it
Hmm.
doesn't really help that much. Or you can do a mock interview where, like you say, you're getting direct and precise feedback, or I
Yeah.
call it like actionable feedback, meaning I think the way we give feedback is literally down to like, hey, here you said this way, and I would just tweak that slightly and I would say it this way instead, and here's
Yeah.
why. Or like, hey, here you talked about, you spent 2 or 3 sentences talking about this, and that entire part I would say is unnecessary, so I would probably cut that out. Or hey, here,
Hmm.
like, you structure your answer this way and it's a little bit out of sequence and it will flow a little bit better if you flipped it around and talked about this first. Like, whatever it may be, but it's like not just like, I think your answer could be a little bit better, or I think your answer needs to be more specific. And it's like, I don't know what that means,
Yeah.
right? But if you have actually precise feedback on like exactly what to change, then it's not hard to go and work on those things, right? But it's just that it's, and things like body language and even tonality, or like always starting certain sentences the same way. Like, a lot of times you're doing those things not on purpose, but you're doing it because you don't realize you're doing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you're just practicing on your own, if you're practicing, or if you're practicing with a friend or an upperclassman who's maybe not that experienced or hasn't interviewed that many people, and they're not as adept at picking up on the little nuanced things, the quality of feedback that you get is not going to be quite what it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of people don't understand that. It's like, well, what's the difference if we do a mock interview with you guys versus with our friends? It's like, well, it just comes down to experience, right? It just comes down to
Hmm.
how many answers Like with behavioral answers, like I said, everybody has different answers, like you said. So it really comes down to like not whose answer is right or whose answer is wrong, but like whose answers are better and whose answers are worse, right?
Yeah.
So how big of a
Yeah.
sample size do you have? Or the person that's interviewing you, how large of a sample size do they have to compare your answers against so that they can actually give you not just their personal opinion on whether your answer is good or not, but relative to all the other answers that they've seen in the past, right? And also like having data around, okay, all these other answers, what type of offer did they end up getting? Like, how
Yeah.
good the answers are these? Oh, these are the answers that always got the bulge bracket and elite boutique banks. Okay, well, what are the commonalities that these answers have in common? How can we maybe incorporate some of that into your answers, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the key to behaviorals. Is like there's so much more to it than what meets the eye. And I think like most people spend so much time is like, oh, I gotta study the technicals, and then like they spend very very little time, right? If you're totally honest, like before Washington National, you probably spend very very little time thinking about the behaviorals because on the surface it's like, well, what else is there to do? There's only so much I can do about the behaviorals.
Yeah.
Like, what else am I going to come up with? This is the answer that I have already.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good enough, but I hope it's good enough. Like, that's not good enough, right? Or
Mhm.
that doesn't inspire confidence when you walk into that interview, right? Um, so I guess you revamped all your interviews, technicals, behavioral, second time around, a lot more confident. How many offers did you get the second time around?
The second time around, I I landed quite a number of interviews in the first half of the year. So, recruiting season is usually split into two sections, before the summer and kind of after the summer. So before the summer of that year, I landed quite a number of interviews with middle market, also a couple of elite boutiques as well. And then I ended up getting a offer from a upper middle market bank, and I was quite happy with it. Obviously, especially given that I was able to land an offer so early in the process for that year. Um, and that kind of concluded my recruiting for the first half of the year. But I also picked up, I guess, recruiting for just, I had one more process after the summer as well for a bulge bracket. And that's kind of when I landed my second offer. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you ended up with ultimately the final offer that you accepted was the bulge bracket offer, obviously.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, are you comfortable telling people which bank you're going to be going to?
Yeah. Bank of America.
Got it. Okay. That's awesome. I mean, but for those of you that are wondering, Bank of America is still sponsoring, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, they are. They are. They are.
But okay, so you're going to Bank of America, which that's phenomenal. I mean, because that's one of the probably top, handful of banks out there, right? And so it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
much as good as you could hope for. And so, I mean, geez, that was a long journey, though, right? That was like, I mean, from the time you started working with us to the time you finished up, that was probably what 13, 14 months from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And you're probably
Definitely. Yeah.
grinding that entire time, and so it must be super satisfying to get an outcome like this that you're super happy with. It makes everything worth it, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
Do you have any last piece of advice or pearls of wisdom that you want to give to maybe other students who are currently in a similar boat that you were in maybe a year ago or whatever? Like maybe they're an international student, maybe they're just starting to think about recruiting for investment banking.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're a little bit lost or not really sure where to start. Like, what's one thing that you wish you had known back then, or you wish someone could have told you back then that maybe would have made things a lot easier for you?
Yeah. I think uh, something that's really important to keep in mind, I would say, is to really think ahead and ask for help when you need it, and don't twiddle your thumbs and try to figure out everything on your own if it's not going to be efficient. Especially with something like investment banking recruiting, where it moves very quickly and it starts very early. You don't really have the luxury of time on your side
Mm-hmm.
to try. You don't really have that luxury to trial and error or try figure or waste time on things that aren't going to help you with your recruiting outcomes. You don't really have that time to waste. So I think it's really important that once you decide that investment banking is what you want to pursue, you really commit to it, and you ask for help when you need, recognize help, recognize where you need, what you need help with, and that way you're able to really, like I said, just not waste time, be able to tackle the process one step at a time, know exactly what you need to get done and be fully prepared for interviews, because once the interviews come, it's already too late to start preparing. You have to be prepared before the process even starts.
Right, absolutely. That's great advice, man. Awesome. So guys, for those of you that are still listening, I think Jerry gave a lot of really great advice on just how to navigate this entire process as a international student, right? Like basically, you have to start early as much as possible. And regardless of whether you're starting early or starting late, the biggest key is to just look for the most efficient way of doing things, right? Like look for um, the quickest way for you to get up to speed on, having relevant experiences on your resume, or the most effective way to network with bankers so you can actually like not have to reach out to as many people and still get to the number of referrals that you need, or maybe even like the quickest way to learn all the technicals where everything's in one place and you can just follow a step-by-step process, right? Or like getting the feedback that you need on your behavioral answers, both the content as well as the delivery of your answers. A lot of these things, and look, on the behavioral side, it's not even a matter of time. Sometimes some of these things, even if you spend more time on it on your own, you're not going to get too much out of that because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, but with all these things, like rather than doing the trial and error, you actually want to just have like a proven system or process to follow from the get-go, because banking recruiting is not one of those things where you have multiple opportunities to like do this over and over again. Like, I mean, with Jerry, like, yeah, okay, he recruited again, but that was really it, right? Like if the second time it didn't work out, then that was it, right? And also like not everyone wants to delay graduation by a semester, right? Like obviously staying in school an extra semester, like there are trade-offs that you're making with that too, right? And so the best thing to do is just like be able to get it right the first time, because otherwise like some people are like, oh well, if I don't get in, I'll go back to business school or get an MBA and try again. Yeah, you could do that, but that's another 4 or 5 years down the road by the time you're done with business school, and you also have to pay over probably $200,000 just to go back, and you're not making money during that time because you have to forego your salary because you can't work a job. And so the opportunity cost is humongous, right? So the easiest and best way is to just get in the first time as an undergrad. And I know that's easier said than done, but there are proven processes that you can follow that's available to you. You just have to want that for yourself, right? And so if that's the type of thing that you're looking for and you feel like, hey, you understand the urgency and the matter, and you're just wanting the most efficient way of doing things from the get-go, then I want to encourage you to reach out and schedule a free strategy session with our team. You can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. So you can go to www.wallstmastermind.com/apply. And what we'll do on this call is, someone from our team will jump on with you. We'll talk to you and we'll learn more about your situation. What are your goals? What are some of the challenges that you might be having? And what do you need help with exactly? And then based on that, we'll come up with like a tailored game plan for you that, you can either get our help with, or you can go and, take that and run with it, implement it on your own, whatever you think is best for you. But at a minimum, you just get some advice on how to be more effective and efficient in this recruiting process, and time is of the essence, right? So don't wait any longer. If that's something that you think would be beneficial for you, I want to encourage you to go and book this call now. Our calendar does fill up and it is first come, first serve. So again, we look forward to talking to you and hopefully serving you. And with that, I think it's a wrap. Jerry, I want to thank you so much for, again, taking so much time out of your day to talk to us and just share your experiences with other students who are maybe in the same boat as you. And I think, this was a hugely insightful and beneficial conversation for a lot of people. And I can't I can't wait to see kind of all the success that you have ahead of you, and obviously let us know how your internship goes, and um, I'm sure we'll be in touch. And congrats again on all the success, man. You worked hard for this, and you definitely deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that'll be it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.